Chapter 1 9 a.m., 27th of October, 2054. First day of Project Planet Swap, a 5-day event. From Spencer's home, it was around 35 miles along Route 375 to the launch base of N.P.R.P. "Spencer!" shouted Lisa from the garage as she packed the rest of the family's belongings in the Range Rover. Essential items were to be taken, and nothing more. Weight restrictions that N.P.R.P, New Planet Relocation Program, had set. "Can you grab my mobile? It's next to the bookcase." "Lisa, there's no point taking your phone. You won't be able to use it once we're inside of the launch base," said Spencer in a matter-of-fact tone. "But I need to make a call on the way," said Lisa. "Okay," replied Spencer in a huff. At that moment, Janie, the 8-year-old daughter of Lisa and Spencer, came running down the stairs into the garage, grabbing her mother's leg. "Mommy, did you pack Jake? I can't find him anywhere," said Janie in a fretful manner. Jake was her cuddly bear companion. "Yes, sweetie, he's in the back of the car," said Lisa as she kissed Janie on the top of her head. Janie smiled up at Lisa. "Thank you, Mommy," Janie replied. Lisa opened the passenger side of the car and climbed in. Janie jumped into the back. Lisa switched on the radio. But as usual, the stations crackled nothing but the broadcast of N.P.R.P. filled the airwaves. Today was a different broadcast than previous weeks, which had been the build-up to today. The explanation of priority travelers, which ranged from first priority, N.P.R.P. employees, who included Lisa and Spencer. They worked in the IT department of N.P.R.P., to the homeless and over 70s, last on the list. Phase 1 of evacuation in progress. Green barcode travelers must be at the launch base by no later than 10 a.m. and have the correct amount of weight-restricted baggage, belched the radio. Spencer jumped into the driver's side of the car. He turned to Janie in the back and smiled. She smiled back. "Lisa, Janie, put on your safety masks," said Spencer. Radiation levels had still not yet resolved, and masks were recommended to be worn when outside of Ashcroft Village. Spencer started up the car, then pressed the remote control to the garage doors. As the doors raised, the heat instantly beamed into the car. Spencer turned on the air conditioning, as they all put on their special sunglasses manufactured by N.P.R.P. The UV rays had become intolerable. They drove onto the street and joined the procession of traffic from Ashcroft Plains, N.P.R.P.'s old employee settlement. "Daddy?" said Janie. "Yes, sweetheart," replied Spencer. "Will there be other little girls like me on our new planet?" Janie spoke shyly. "Sure, honey. There'll be lots of new friends for you to make there," said Spencer. Janie smiled with excitement. Spencer turned to Lisa and offered her a reassured smile. Lisa smiled back with uncertainty as Spencer drove out of the village and onto the motorway, heading for the launch base. Chapter 2 27 years earlier, 2027. "Active Phase 3, were the words of General Standheim. His stance was enough for people to listen. "But sir, there may be too much power," replied his command team member. "Activate it," shouted Standheim. Command team turned up the dial from Phase 2 to Phase 3, an extra 100,000 magnetism, now reaching 300,000 magnetism, the equivalent of 600,000 miles per hour. There was a loud humming noise that was heard from inside of the experimental N.P.R.P. launch control bunker. The view from the giant horizontal window overlooked the desolate sand flats of Ashcroft Plains. Through the window, Standheim eagerly waited for the EMT 2000 launch pad, which stood for Electromagnetic Traveler, to power up. This platform was a pyramid shape with the bottom facing upwards and the tip sunk firmly in solid, square metal base, 400 foot from each point of the pyramid base. Each point of the pyramid base lay solid silver spheres, which were now firing electric pulses to each point of the pyramid's base. The countdown clock in the bunker read 23 minutes, 35 seconds. "Not long now," said Standheim. The command team watched in anticipation as the clock reached 23 minutes, 55 seconds. The clock reached 24 minutes exact, when there was a loud, split-second vibrating boom. A shiny egg-shaped metallic object seemed like it had just appeared out of thin air right on top of the inverted pyramid. Hovering as still as a statue, the power was turned to 0 as Standheim requested to do so. Along the seamless egg-shaped object, a humming sound was produced as the door opened in a sliding motion, morphing in on itself. A few seconds later, Captain Jeff Kramer, the first electromagnetic pilot, emerged. Kramer walked slowly and casually from the object, looked towards the bunker, and produced a thumbs-up sign. It was possible 300,000 magnetism was the right amount for a single trip to the moon, making a departure and return journey in 48 minutes. Standheim was right. Standheim's predictions of the EMTs were correct. There was a roar of excitement in the bunker, cheering and clapping. Standheim stood firm and proud with a slight smile, overwhelmed in himself as to the achievement that had been accomplished. Project Planet Swap was in effect. Chapter 3, 27th of October, 2054, 5 days before travel. It was 9:50 a.m. when Spencer, Janie, and Lisa arrived at the launch base. They were third in line approaching the base checkpoint. Here stood 3 heavily armed N.P.R.P. guards, checking on ID badges and correct colored barcodes. There were giant electronic steel doors on the entrance to the base. Spencer drove slowly and approached the guards. Winding down the window, he handed 3 ID badges to the guard. After inspection, the guard told Spencer to head straight toward the vehicle storage lift. This machine stored cars in a large travel pod. Once docked, Spencer and family headed towards the travel shuttle convoy. This mode of transport was rather like the same principle of a roller coaster without the thrill ride. Once inside the shuttle, the rounded steel door closed airtight with the Spencer family inside. Janie looked at her father with bewilderment. Spencer gave her a reassuring smile. A pulse was charged, and the shuttle moved swiftly off towards Section 5, one of the 250 resettlement program neighborhood. Spencer hummed a song by David Bowie. Now it's time to leave the capsule if you dare. The shuttle was silent as it sped along the track. Spencer, Lisa, and Janie sat next to each other. Janie clutched her teddy bear whilst looking out of the window. Spencer looked out of the other window as the shuttle moved on from the launch base along the track towards the settlement. Spencer thought about the devastation of the outside world, an apocalypse of events that had led to this day. Dark clouds filled the sky. The surroundings consisted of nothing but demolished buildings, wrecked transport, giant gaps in the earth, bridges half-toppled in the cracks of the earth. What was once normal life was now reduced to wreckage and dust. Feeling emotional, Spencer leaned over to Lisa and kissed her on the head. Lisa looked at Spencer and smiled. They had been in the shuttle for 10 minutes before it reduced speed and slowed down into the docking station. At least 7 other shuttles in a line, side by side, docked at the same time. In front of the docking station were the central entrance gates to the settlement area. Could all passengers please check their colored barcodes and enter at the correct terminal points? Thank you. The loudspeaker belched out this stern order. Spencer and family headed toward their red-colored terminal for check-in. They arrived after queuing for a while and were met by security, who gave them their new tenant pack, which told them their number to the settlement pod in which they were to stay for the next 5 days until their position in the EMT was available. They walked through the terminal into an enormous square. Spencer looked around and above this space-aged square tower block. All glass windows covered this structure, giving a bird's-eye view into each settlement pod. Pod 72, said Lisa, as she gingerly flicked through the tenant's manual. Spencer nodded in agreement and led the march across the square to the far end, to the lift to the first floor. The family entered into the lift and pressed for the first floor. They walked along the corridor of the first floor and finally reached Pod 72. Spencer used the slide card into the door. The door made a shh sound before it opening to left. Inside the pod, it was very spacious to what it looked like from the square. Everything was basic and studio flat designed. Spencer and Lisa placed down the heavy bags they had brought with them. Janie ran to the window that overlooked the square and stared across the way. People in other pods were going about their business. Lisa headed for the kitchen to prepare drinks. Spencer used the touchscreen monitor. Instructions lay at the side of the monitor. Welcome to Ashcroft Village Resettlement Program. I am here to answer any question you may have in relation to your relocation program, anything you need to know about your pod, and any other question you may have." The information was old news for Spencer, as he had learned the evacuation procedure on starting employment with N.P.R.P. It was late. Janie had fallen asleep on the sofa. Spencer gently lifted her and took her to one of the bedrooms in the pod. On arrival back to the living room, Spencer noted Lisa wiping her eyes as she sat on the sofa. Spencer sat beside her and put his arm around her. "Everything's going to be okay, baby," said Spencer. "Why has everything come to this, Spencer?" "Baby, you can't blame yourself. This day was inevitable, and there was nothing anyone could do." Spencer pulled Lisa in tight and gave her a reassuring hug. "We got 5 days here, then we can restart our life," said Spencer sympathetically. "I hope so. I really do," said Lisa. Chapter 4. 4 days before travel. The morning came. Janie was the first one up. She ran to Spencer and Lisa's bedroom, jumped on the bed, and in between the two. Holding Jake in her arms, she smiled at Spencer. Spencer smiled back as Lisa arose from the bed and headed for the shower. "Daddy, when are we going to our other home?" said Janie softly. "In 4 days, sweetheart. Let's go and make some breakfast for your mom," said Spencer. Janie bounced off the end of the bed and headed for the kitchen. Spencer followed. "What shall we make, Daddy?" said Janie. Spencer was looking out of the living room window into the settlement square. People were going back and forth like an army of ants. "Daddy!" shouted Janie. "Yes, honey. Get some eggs from the fridge," Spencer said, and joined Janie in the kitchen. Spencer and Janie started up some scrambled eggs. Lisa appeared from the bathroom, drying her hair and wrapping in a towel. "We're making you breakfast," said Janie. "Thank you, sweetie," said Lisa, giving Janie a kiss on her forehead. There was a beeping sound from the information monitor. Spencer approached the terminal and touched the screen, which was flashing incoming call. "Good morning, Mr. Green," said a computerized voice. "Good morning," said Spencer. "Please could you report to N.P.R.P control room in 30 minutes, please?" The terminal switched off. Lisa was looking at Spencer in a bemused way. "What could that be for, Spencer? I thought we were supposed to be isolated in our pod until extraction," said Lisa. "Probably just a few more instructions. You know how N.P.R.P are," said Spencer casually. Spencer went back to the bedroom and put on some clothing. Lisa and Janie were giggling and making a mess with the breakfast. Spencer picked up his slide card and left Pod 72, and headed for the lift and towards the shuttle. Spencer made his way through the square, looking around him. N.P.R.P employees were rushing in different directions to their place of work. Everyone wore the N.P.R.P all-in-one jumpsuit, red in color. Like a blood river, everyone blended in. On arrival at the control room door, it was guarded by 2 of N.P.R.P's special police, holding neutron laser guns. One blast from them, and it was good night Vienna. Spencer used his slide card and entered Control Room 30. He was met by Jim Stoner, a man who Standheim had respect for. The control room was buzzing with technology. Keyboards clicked, radars blipped. Launch base employees wore the jumpsuits, but to recognize an important N.P.R.P employee, a golden N.P.R.P logo was emblazoned on the front of the suit. "Good morning, Mr. Green. We have asked you to come this morning for final preparation check before departure. Also, Mr. Standheim would like to see you," said Jim Stoner. Spencer nodded in agreement. Mr. Stoner and Spencer walked through the control room and headed toward the rear doors, exiting to the launch base observation room. They sat and watched as a group of around 50 people heading down a walkway toward one of the many EMTs. The seamless door closed silently as the egg-shaped craft hovered silently. There was a crackling sound as electric pulses fired from the 4 corners of the inverted pyramid base, striking the bottom of the EMT. The control room switched to Phase 3, 1000 magnetism. A split-second blinding flash occurred. The EMT vanished. "The procedure is always the same. In 24 minutes, the EMT will arrive on the moon," said Stoner. "Does the EMT remain stable on arrival, at moon base with even balance?" said Spencer informally. "Perfect stability. Trajectory speed 600,000 miles per hour. The inner titanoid lining separates the G-force, making the interior feel completely stationary. Your work has paid off, Mr. Green, said Stoner with a nod and a smile. Spencer had been working for N.P.R.P for 27 years now. Spencer was selected from many other scientists at the age of 20, picked by Standheim. He knew his IQ was way above the rest. Standheim taught him all he knew, as he did with his father. Spencer respected Standheim, and Standheim, without his own family, treated him like his own son after Spencer's father died of a heart attack. Spencer and Stoner left the observation room and headed back through the control room. Spencer shook Stoner's hand and left the control room and headed for Section 12, Ashcroft Medical Bay, where General Standheim was residing, now living the last of his days in hospital bed, where he had been for the last 2 years, riddled with cancer. Chapter 5. It was a long walk from the control room down to the medical bay, along a long, tubular corridor N.P.R.P employees shuttled back and forth along a central shuttle track. Civilian walkways were situated on the left and right of the central shuttle location. The conversations were always the same as people walked on chatting to each other, discussing what their new life would bring them on arrival to the moon base. Spencer arrived at the medical bay. He used his slide card to unlock the safety door. Spencer Green, authorized, said a computerized voice. Inside the bay consisted of a circular ward fully attended by N.P.R.P medical staff. Spencer approached one of the staff. "Excuse me, do you have the ward number for General Standheim, please?" "Yes, sir. Take the first door to the left of the west side area and lift number 1 to the 27th floor. Mr. Standheim's quarters are right there." "Thank you," said Spencer, and headed straight for it. Standheim's room was at the top of the medical bay, the only room there. 27th floor, said another computerized voice as the door to the lift slid smoothly open. Spencer knocked Standheim's room. An orderly opened it. The sound of the ECG machine beeped, and an electronic lung controlled Standheim's breathing. "Is that you, Spencer?" said Standheim in a soft, husky voice. "Yes, General," said Spencer sympathetically. "Good. Please could you leave us alone?" said Spencer to the orderly. He closed the door on leaving. Spencer walked slowly over to Standheim's deathbed and sat beside him. The right-hand side of the room was a complete glass window overlooking the settlement square. "Busy view you got there, General," said Spencer humorlessly. The general smiled. "Spencer, when are you scheduled for relocation?" said Standheim. "In 4 days, sir." "What EMT terminal will you be going from?" said Standheim. "Traveler 324, sir," replied Spencer. "For the last 27 years, you know I have been studying the trajectory angles and destinations for the EMTs," said Standheim. "Yes, sir, I am aware of that." "I need to tell you something now, Spencer, that is going to be upsetting for you and your family." Spencer listened attentively. "During my EMT studies, I was reading a book by Immanuel Velikovsky and decided to take a look into our Earth's gravitational pull. The results I found absolutely unnerved me. I found that the inner masses of our doomed Earth are being pushed to the periphery of Earth's rotation, and our movement is being disturbed. Spencer, we are heading for the sun, and so is the moon." Spencer felt a wave of sickness come over him. "Jesus Christ, all this work we have done, all for nothing, the end of civilization, God damn it," cried Spencer, as he placed his hands onto his head. "You're right, Spencer. There's nothing we can do to stop this. All our work was toward building our new future on the moon. As you know, the discovery of water under the surface gave way to building the biospheres, which could contain life," rasped Standheim. "There are already over 72 positioned on the moon base. We gotta stop the EMT launches," said Spencer nervously. "Did you not listen, Spencer? The Earth is heading there too. There is a total population of 200,000 civilians, all of which, whether they are on the moon base or Earth, will be vaporized," said Standheim. Spencer stood up and stared out of the window into the settlement area. "What I'm going to tell you now, Spencer, may give chance to start the next human race. There is only you and your family that can achieve this." Spencer turned from the window to Standheim. looking confused. West of the central EMT launch base, Area 227 is a secret base. It is accessible from the settlement square. It was used for the first flight of the megaspace cruiser traveled by Jeff Kramer. He was in search of an alternative destination in case of what my findings would bring about the future of the moon and Earth. This area contains a traveler that has been tested to long-distance travel, with the same construction of the mega space cruiser. No other EMT can compare with its life support programming. It is unique, Spencer. Its coordinates have been preset by myself. The EMT is in perfect condition. It has room for 3 people and only 3. This means you, Lisa, and Janie. Complete with cryogenic pods enabling you and your family to sleep during flight. There is an emergency cryopod which should only be used if there is a failure on one of the others. The coordinates are set for a planet called Gliese 581d. This planet is a super-Earth and is situated in the Goldilocks zone, 20 light-years from here, and is going to be a big change to this planet. It's the first outside our solar system to be declared habitable by scientists. The rocky exoplanet Gliese 581d meets key requirements for sustaining Earth-like life, including rainfall and possibly even watery oceans. The planet orbits a red dwarf star similarly called Gliese 581. On its outer fringes called the Goldilocks zone, where the temperature is not so hot that water boils away, nor so cold that water is perpetually frozen. The discovery caught scientists by surprise because the planet was previously ruled out as a habitable country. But a new computer model with the capacity to simulate extraterrestrial climates has confirmed that Gliese 581d really could harbor life, showing the prior assumption to be wrong. With a mass of at least 5.6 times that of Earth, Gliese 581d is classified as a super-Earth. This discovery is important because it's the first time climate modelers have proved that the planet is potentially habitable, and all observers agree that the exoplanet exists. On average, the light that Gliese 581d receives from its star has about 30% of the intensity of sunlight on Earth. It may also be tidally locked, meaning that one side of it always faces the sun, which would give it permanent day side and night side. By now, if Kramer made it there, it should have a similar biosphere containment area, such as Ashcroft Village, but on a very bigger scale. If Kramer made it and delivered the human payload for the last 27 years, they will have been building the biodome. Although I cannot guarantee that it has been constructed, I have faith in Kramer. When he piloted the mega space cruiser on a path to Gliese, his signal was lost upon arrival in the Goldilocks zone. There has been no contact from him since then. Now the EMT will only have the first stages of electromagnetic pull until you hit the dark side of the moon. Once there, you will be set on a standard free glide path toward Gliese 581d. As for other alien life on this planet, it is unknown, but it has a sun which indicates that there could be life, human or non. In 4 days' time, at precisely 8:20 a.m., you must set course there. At precisely 8:27 p.m., the Earth and the Moon's collapse are imminent. Get into this base and enter the EMT. It's your only chance of survival. The rest of the human race will be no more, said Standheim with sincerity. Spencer stepped forward to Standheim's bed. Underneath this bed, there is a briefcase. Please get it, Spencer, said Standheim. Spencer reached under the bed and pulled out the silver handheld briefcase. Digital coded locks kept the case secure. Inside that case is one neutron laser weapon. Handheld. This will stop any N.P.R.P. employees interrupting your mission. Also, in the case is a Sumerian language book, a brief history of our time on Earth, and finally, an up-to-date planetary map, plus all the trajectory coordinates your father gathered during Kramer's flight. Spencer, you must do this. It is you and you only that has the knowledge and skills to restart a new human race, said Standheim. Spencer was dumbstruck. He found this hard to believe. How could he explain this to his family? How could he live with all the deaths he was to witness? He and his family were also probably moving towards imminent death. Cryogenic travel was a life-or-death risk. The options were only one: to take the chance with his family. Gliese 581d was 20 light-years away. It was an impossible mission, less than 30% survival rate. If life was already there, the workforce that created the biosphere home was over 10,000. Along with Kramer, who had traveled there 27 years ago on board N.P.R.P's unique, purposely built megaspace cruiser. If they still even existed. As there was no communication from Gliese 581d, and no knowledge of hostile alien life forms. Could cryogenics hold them long enough to travel that kind of distance? Spencer shook his head. To Spencer, this seemed absurd. No human could travel this distance and survive. Spencer dismissed the thought. "General, what about you? There must be a space for you," said Spencer. Standheim laughed. "I have only days left of my life. You need to carry on with your work. Try to make a better planet for you and yours," sighed Standheim. "You must leave now, Spencer, and make all the necessary plans for your departure." Standheim reached out his hand, and Spencer took hold of it. Standheim pulled him close. "I wish you all the luck for your future and the discovery of a new generation of life," whispered Standheim. A tear filled Spencer's eyes. "I will never forget you, General. You have been a father, a teacher, and an inspiration to all," sobbed Spencer. Standheim smiled and nodded and released his grip from Spencer. Spencer turned and headed for the door to leave. "Say goodbye to Lisa and little Janie for me," said Standheim with a smile. "I will. I'm going to miss you so much, General," whispered Spencer. Standheim smiled again. "Maybe I will see you in the next life," Standheim remarked sarcastically. Spencer smiled and slid his card through the key slide mechanism. He turned once more to Standheim, who had now fallen asleep. "Goodbye, General," said Spencer quietly as he left Standheim's room. Chapter 6. Spencer made the journey back through the medical bay, along the transportation tunnel, and headed back to Lisa and Janie. Back in the pod, Lisa and Janie were sat watching the Children's Entertainment Channel on the N.P.R.P hologram TV. Spencer headed for the bedroom. He placed the briefcase in the mini-vault behind a steel-paneled wall, which had a 4-number pin code for entry. He headed back to the kitchen and dispensed himself a shot of brandy. He leaned against the breakfast bar and watched Lisa and Janie. Janie was giggling at the show she was watching. Lisa turned to Spencer. "Any news on the departure?" said Lisa. "I spoke to the general. Everything is set for us," replied Spencer nonchalantly. "Great," said Lisa with a smile. Spencer smiled back and went over the conversation in his head that he had just had with Standheim. How could he bring himself to tell Lisa about what he had been told? It was 7:30 p.m. Tomorrow would be 3 days away from departure. "Okay, little one, bedtime," said Lisa to Janie. "Just 5 more minutes," replied Janie, enthralled in the TV. "Up you get. It's way past your bedtime," said Lisa as she picked up the remote for the TV, pushed the standby button. The TV enveloped in on itself into a tiny dot of light before vanishing completely. "Okay," said Janie, shrugging herself from the sofa, with her teddy Jake in hand. Lisa and Janie headed for the bedroom. Spencer stared out of the pod window. Artificial light beamed down from the biosphere dome that encased the whole of Ashcroft Village. Spencer then pressed the switch to the shutters which covered the windows of the pod. He made his way to the kitchen again and hit another shot of brandy. He would have to tell Lisa. He couldn't keep it from her until the day. Lisa returned from Janie's room, entered the kitchen, and kissed Spencer on the cheek. "So how was your day?" said Spencer. "Fine. Janie and I had a walk around the settlement. Did a little grocery shopping, then back here. Watched some TV, then some more TV. Had lunch, and that's about it. And you?" said Lisa. "I spoke to the general. He told me some news that I really didn't want to hear." Lisa looked puzzled. Spencer walked to the sofa with brandy in hand. "Sit down," said Spencer to Lisa. Spencer began to tell Lisa what Standheim had told him earlier. She broke down on Spencer's shoulder. Spencer and Lisa sat together for a while, deep in thought before turning in for the night. Spencer had a sleepless night as he tried to contemplate the journey. Chapter 7. 3 days before travel. Last days of work for N.P.R.P. Spencer awoke to the sound of the pod window shutters gently rising. He stared at them and watched the light from the outside beam gradually into the pod. Spencer got up. Lisa was still asleep as Spencer made his way to Janie's room. She was also sleeping soundly. He headed for the kitchen, made himself a coffee, and started down into the hustle and bustle of Ashcroft Settlement. The information monitor began to beep and flash. Spencer walked over and touched the crystal screen. Message for Spencer Green. Please attend the medical bay ASAP. Spencer felt a gut feeling that this was something to do with Standheim. Spencer grabbed his swipe card from the side of the info monitor and headed for the door. Lisa awoke to the sound of the magnetic strips on the pod's door relocking as Spencer left. She got up and headed to Janie's room to wake her for the N.P.R.P creche. Lisa prepared breakfast for Janie and she. Janie arrived at the kitchen. She stretched and yawned. As she sat on the stool next to the breakfast bar, Lisa passed a bowl of cereal to Janie and sat down next to her. "What are we going to do today, Mummy?" said Janie, still half asleep, and stirring her cereal in the milk. "Today, honey, I have got to go to work, so that means we can take you to the creche, where all the other kids go when their mummies have to go to work. Then later, I will come and pick you back up. Okay, sweetie?" said Lisa, gently stroking Janie's hair. "Okay, Mummy," said Janie as she slurped her breakfast cereal. Lisa made her way back to her bedroom and laid out some clothing before getting into the voice-activated shower room. Janie finished the last spoonful of cereal when she heard a man shouting in the square below. Janie got off the stool and headed toward the pod windows. Down below stood a man, shouting. Passing N.P.R.P personnel looked at the man, then carried on walking. It was hard for Janie to hear what was being said as the pod windows were strongly insulated. Janie watched as the man seemed to be waving his arms around in an explaining manner. Just then, 2 N.P.R.P security personnel arrived and tried to restrain the man. He flailed his arms around in a defensive manner. At that point, one of the security produced a neutron weapon. He fired one short blast at the man, and he was reduced to dust. Janie gasped and jumped back from the window. Lisa came into the living area, rubbing her hair with a towel. "Okay, sweetie, go and get dressed, please. We've got to get you to that creche," said Lisa. "Mommy, there was a man down in that square, and some men came and made him disappear," said Janie, rapidly trying to explain the event she had just seen in one sentence. "Let's have a look here," said Lisa as she walked to the pod windows. Residents walked back and forth to their work destinations. As usual, nothing seemed out of place. The place where the man had been cleaned by security like nothing had happened. "The men, they have gone now," Janie huffed and ran toward her bedroom. "Have a quick wash, Janie, before you put on your clothes," shouted Lisa as she carried on looking out of the pod windows, brushing her long hair. Lisa noticed where Janie had pointed to where the man stood. There seemed to be a black streak that the security had missed. Lisa went over to her handbag and pulled out her mobile, which she had concealed on her journey here. She walked back to the pod windows, held up her transparent mobile device, tapped the screen into camera mode, and zoomed in on the black streak she had noticed. She snapped a photo and walked over to the sofa in the living area. Lisa tapped on the applications menu and prepared the photo for composition analysis. 15 seconds for object analysis. Composition results. The results came back. Lisa's heart sank as the 14 composites, which were found, made up the human body, along with 2 other, cotton and polyester fabric. "Ready," said Janie as she came back into the room with Jake in her hand. Lisa turned to her and smiled, tapped her phone to standby, and placed it back in her handbag and put the handbag in the bedroom's mini vault system. 4 beeps sounded as Lisa punched in the entry code. She placed the bag next to Spencer's briefcase, locked the vault, and headed back to Janie at the entrance to the pod. Lisa slid her card through the door and opened it. Janie ran into the hallway toward the lifts. Lisa slid her card and relocked the pod and made her way to Janie, who was holding the lift for her. The lift closed. Lisa and Janie headed toward the creche facility. Chapter 8. On arrival at the medical bay, Spencer was met by Jim Stoner, Standheim's associate. Spencer shook Stoner's hand. "He died last night. He passed in his sleep," said Stoner with sincerity. Spencer hung his head in sorrow. "Funeral arrangements are in order. Are you okay?" said Stoner reassuringly. "Yeah, I'm fine," said Spencer, adjusting his composure. "Spencer, I need to show you something," said Stoner. "What?" said Spencer. "Follow me," said Stoner. Spencer and Stoner headed toward the launch base control, taking the shuttle. On arrival, Jim Stoner used his swipe card to enter the command base. There were at least 50 computer screens situated in the room, each one manned, each person fully engaged in the preparation of EMT flight launches. At the front of this room was an enormous glass window overlooking the launch areas. Every 10 minutes, there would be an EMT launch, delivering another 50 people on Moonbase. Stoner arrived at his computer terminal and sat down. Spencer sat beside him. "I want you to take a look at these coordinates," said Stoner. Spencer watched as Stoner punched in numbers on the glass transparent keyboard. Each letter he punched in illuminated a fluorescent green glow. Spencer knew what was about to happen. He was going to show him the coordinates that he already knew. "Jim, what are you doing? We've been through the coordinate checks a million times now," huffed Spencer. "Not these ones," said Stoner sternly. The coordinates flashed up on the holographic screen. These coordinates were Standheim's. The ones he told Spencer about the Gleiss coordinates. "These coordinates are not set for Moon Base. They're for Gleiss. And there are not enough long-distance pods to carry all civilians to the Goldilocks zone. In fact, Spencer, there is only one in Area 227 with a passenger capacity of 3 persons. The standard EMTs can't travel that far. Something's got to be done. Someone's got to stop this from happening," said Stoner frantically. He had now lost his mind. As he typed in the EMT shutdown code, failure warning alarms belched out of the launch base speakers as a flashing red alarm lit up base control. On doing this, an EMT had just launched. With no electromagnetic power system running, the craft careered toward the wastelands. The craft disappeared out of sight, which was met with a large explosion, complete with a cloud of dust. "Jesus, Stoner, what have you done? Wait, hold on, where are you going?" shouted Spencer as Stoner dashed out of the launch base control exit, heading toward the shuttle which would take him to Ashcroft Square. From there, he could pick up his daughter from the N.P.R.P creche facility. Stoner had been a single father for 2 years after the death of his wife, Cheryl, who was killed during EMT construction. His hatred toward the N.P.R.P organization had never ceased. His wife was killed by negligence. This was overlooked to save N.P.R.P reputation. N.P.R.P security made chase after him, but Stoner made it to the shuttle before them. On entering the slide door of the shuttle, Stoner looked back at Spencer, disheartened. As the shuttle doors closed behind him, the vibrating sound of the shuttle's magnetic rails hummed, whisking Stoner toward Ashcroft Square. Spencer heard the N.P.R.P security behind him, radioing through to personnel in Ashcroft Square. The next shuttle arrived, as usual, every 5 seconds. Spencer boarded to try and catch up with Stoner. He took a seat and pondered as to what Stoner might be capable of, what he was thinking. If he was to be thinking of boarding 227 EMT, this would cause chaos, as he and Spencer were the only ones who knew about this EMT, and making a dash for it would definitely arouse suspicion and was impossible to launch yet. Plasma monitors covered the roof of the shuttle. The program was always the same, a guide to what new life was going to be like on the moon base. The shuttle arrived after a 5-minute journey. The shuttle doors whooshed open. Spencer rushed off, looking down the platform. He could see Stoner walking briskly toward the giant glass doors to the square. "Jim!" shouted Spencer, as he rushed after him about 30 meters behind. Stoner looked behind him as he passed through the doors. Spencer made it to the doors just as he saw Stoner waving his arms and shouting at N.P.R.P security. "You can't do this! You're sending them all to their deaths!" "Jim Stoner, put your hands on your head and drop to the floor," the digitally voiced security ranted. Spencer watched with bated breath and fear in his eyes. The residents traveling to and fro all stood still in the square. "We're all fucked," giggled Stoner maniacally. Stoner reached inside his pocket. "Put your hands on your head," screamed security. Stoner carried on, pulling something out from the pocket. At that point, an N.P.R.P. security squared him in the chest with a neutron laser. Stoner was thrown back a foot. His arm flailed in the air as a photograph of Maisie, his daughter, floated into the air. "No!" shouted Spencer, dropping to his knees. Stoner felt a burning sensation as his head rolled back, catching a glimpse of a young girl looking down at him from a pod window above. Spencer covered his face with his hands as he watched Stoner completely vaporize. Chapter 9. Lisa used her N.P.R.P. slide card to enter the settlement's creche. Many of the children were hooked up to an online virtual reality system. Some played with the conventional toys whilst some were reading. The classroom held about 50 children. There were 27 children's creche facilities positioned all around the N.P.R.P. settlement. "Hello, you must be Lisa," said the creche teacher. "Yes, hello, and this is Janie," said Lisa, holding Janie's shoulders and stroking her hair. "Hello there, Janie," said the teacher. Janie smiled shyly. "I have a little girl here who has also just joined us. Her name is Maisie," said the teacher. Maisie came from behind the teacher, smiling and holding a bear just like Jake, Janie's bear. "Hello, Janie," said Maisie. "Hello," said Janie. Janie turned to her mother. "Janie, I've got to go to work now, and I will be back to pick you up in a few hours. It looks fun here, and you have a new friend here, Maisie," said Lisa. Janie watched as her mother left, back through the creche entrance. The teacher left the children to themselves. "Do you want to play a game?" said Maisie, smiling. Maisie was 8 years old, the same age as Janie. "Yes," said Janie, shyly. Maisie walked toward the corner of the creche, passing the other children who were plugged into the virtual learning machines. Janie followed to a child's play area, which was covered in soft furnishings. To the rear of the area were storage racks containing old board games. Above, to the top of the storage rack, hanged a sign which the children had made. It read, "Toys of Yesteryear," the lettering in an arrangement of colors. Maisie pulled up to a table, 2 square cushioned seats. Janie sat down on one, whilst Maisie rummaged through the old board games. "Have you played before?" said Maisie, trying to grab Janie's attention as she had her back turned to her. "Yes," said Janie in a sarcastic tone, like she had just asked her what 1 + 1 was. "I will be Reds," said Maisie. "So do your mommy and daddy work with my mommy and daddy?" said Maisie as she slid in the first red piece into the center of the board. "I think so," said Janie, shrugging her shoulders as she placed in her yellow piece into the board. "My daddy says we are not going to Moon. We are on a special mission, and we are going to a better place." "Where is the special mission?" said Janie, intrigued. "Don't know," said Maisie passively, sliding another Connect 4 piece into the board, making it the 4th piece. "I win," said Maisie, causing Janie to jump a little. Maisie smiled and gave herself a victory cheer. Maisie stared over Janie's shoulder and noticed her stepmother, Leah, stood with the teacher in tears, wiping her nose with a tissue. Maisie ran to her and grasped her leg. Her mother cradled her head, held her hand, and exited the creche. Janie watched as Maisie turned back to Janie, with a sad expression, waving goodbye. Janie waved back. Chapter 10. 27 years earlier. Kramer exited the EMT and headed for launch control. A low, diminishing, electric buzzing noise could be heard behind him as the EMT powered down. He walked from the launch pad toward the door to the control room where Standheim stood inside. "Great job, Kramer," said Standheim, reaching to shake Kramer's hand. "It was a smooth ride, General, and a perfect embarking on the moon's surface. The moon's launch pad has been constructed to perfection," said Kramer officially. "Was the speed and journey time still the same?" said Standheim. "As normal, General. 300,000 magnetism, and journey time 24 minutes, said Kramer. "Outstanding. Come with me, Kramer. I have something to tell you," said Standheim. As they walked toward Standheim's office, Standheim used his slide card to enter the room. Kramer looked around as Standheim walked to his desk and sat down. There were pictures hanging on the walls, pictures of Standheim with astronauts, pictures of the construction of Ashcroft Village, pictures of the EMTs, and a variety of family pictures. As you are aware, the mega cruiser has been checked and is ready for the first and maybe only departure to Glais. As you know from recent study, there is a possibility that the moon, along with the Earth, could be heading for the sun, said Standheim. Cut to the chase, General. That's old news to me, said Kramer, as threw himself into a chair facing Standheim. He kicked up his legs onto Standheim's desk, reaching inside his leather bomber jacket, producing a Cuban cigar. I need you to pilot it, said Standheim abruptly. Kramer held still. One hand held his cigar, whilst one hand brandished a gun lighter. He looked into Standheim's eyes. There was a second's silence as a flame was produced from the lighter. A plume of smoke filled the air. You've got 4 EMT trainee pilots working their asses off in the simulator, and you need an old-school rebel like myself to fly your bird? Kramer, your experience of the EMTs is second to none. The trainees don't know what to expect. Anyone can fly a simulation. And to put it bluntly, Kramer, you won't be missed from family members, because you have no family. The N.P.R.P organization will come down hard on me if I mess up with the trainees, said Standheim. Nice to feel loved, said Kramer sarcastically. Kramer, you have the chance to save humankind, said Standheim. Kramer held still. One hand held his cigar, whilst one hand held a gun lighter. Kramer, you have the chance to save humankind. That is a big reward, said Standheim. What are the survival chances, said Kramer. Our studies show that the EMTs could possibly travel 30 times the distance of the moon. Therefore, the mega cruiser, which is 10 times more advanced than the EMTs, would give you a survival rate of 70%. The EMT's survival rate stands at 10%, said Standheim. How long will it take? And how many on board? Said Kramer. 10 to 15 years you will be suspended in the cryopod, depending on the correct trajectory alignment with no spatial disruption. There will be just over 10,000 N.P.R.P employees on board, said Standheim. Kramer leaned forward, stumping out the cigar. He threw his arms around his head. 10 to 15 years? I'm sure I could bring that down to 8 years, General, said Kramer, now standing offering a hand to Standheim. He stood up and grasped Kramer's hand, and firmly shaking it. I knew you would do it, said Standheim proudly. Who else could do it? That bird is in good hands, said Kramer in a matter-of-fact tone. Okay, Kramer, we've got technics running the coordinates. The paperwork and the charts will be ready on launch day, which will be in 2 days' time. Any questions, Kramer? Said Standheim. Yes, there is one thing, said Kramer, standing on the outside of the door to Standheim's office. He reached into his pocket, pulling an empty box of Cuban cigars, and threw them onto Standheim's desk, landing right at the side of a model of the space cruiser. I'm going to need a stack of them. I trust you have a few of them stored away for special occasions, said Kramer, as the door of Standheim's office glided shut. The general smiled. I'll see what I can do, shouted Standheim. Kramer made his way out of launch control and headed toward the passenger shuttles, heading for his pod accommodation within the settlement. Chapter 11. 2 days before travel. A crunching sound echoed underfoot as Spencer walked across the wastelands. Rubble from demolished buildings, broken glass, and an array of debris carpeted the whole earth like a giant trash carpet. The air was thick with fog. Spencer could only see about 6 feet in front of him. It was freezing. Strange sounds echoed in the distance. It was not like any sound Spencer had heard before. Who knows what this earth had become? The wastelands were dangerous, unpredictable, and a place of chaos, an eerie, lawless free-for-all. Spencer, whispered a voice. It sounded like it was all around him. Spencer stopped dead and quickly turned his whole body to the left, then the right. He saw nothing. There was another shriek in the distance as Spencer started walking once more, unsure of his destination. The debris carpet began to get thicker as he walked on. His legs began to get heavy as the crunching underfoot began to get louder. Spencer! Once again, Spencer heard his name called, this time a little louder. He stopped once more. He could see an outline of a person walking towards him. As a pea-sized meteor shower started to fall, Spencer looked around and spotted a half-demolished house. He ran towards it and stepped inside of the garage beside the residence. Looking out of the garage, Spencer heard his name called again as the figure of a person he had just seen slowly approached the garage. The shower now started to get heavier as the figure of a man came into view. His whole body was exposed and charred beyond recognition. The whites of the eyes of this man still remained. "Spencer, you must take them with you. Maisie and Leah." The shower was now real heavy with the size of golf balls smashing to the ground. Spencer had now realized who the man was. It was Jim Stoner, who he had just seen being vaporized. How could this be? "You must do this for me, please, Spencer," said Stoner just as a meteorite shot right through the side of his neck. His flesh sizzled. One by one, meteorites pierced Stoner's body, slicing like a knife through butter. "Please!" screamed Stoner as the final meteorite spliced through his skull. His legs collapsed underneath him as he crumpled into a ball. The sound of the shower was immense as Spencer screamed out, "Yes, I will, Jim, I promise." Spencer shot up from the side of Lisa, who was now awake by Spencer. He was covered in sweat. "It was just a dream, honey. You're okay," said a comforting Lisa, as Spencer stared toward the ceiling of the bedroom inside the pod. Tiny thumps could be heard from the exterior of the settlement's biodome, as a light meteorite shower encased the wastelands. These events had become regular now, nearly 3 times per week, since the turn of the global warming final warning. "I saw him," said Spencer nervously. "Saw who, honey?" said a bemused Lisa. "It was Stoner. He said I have to bring Maisie and Leah with us. He begged me," said Spencer, looking toward Lisa. Lisa pulled Spencer in close and hugged him. "It must have been awful to see him die like that. It's probably playing on your mind," said a supportive Lisa. "He was a good friend. I can't see them left here. We're going to have to tell Stoner's girlfriend about EMT 227. They're going to have to come with us," Spencer said informatively. "I thought you said the traveler could only sustain the life of 3 people, said Lisa. "Yes, that's true in theory, but it may be possible to use the emergency cryopod. All EMTs are fitted with these pods in case of failure to the others. I could reroute our cryopods on a power-saving cycle loop. Whilst Janie and Maisie could sleep in one, we would be in separate pods. I think it would level out. That way we could all go. What do you think?" said Spencer excitedly. "We have no choice, honey." Lisa pulled Spencer in tight once more, hugging him hard. "I'll check the database and find out what pod she and Maisie are in, then contact you here at the information monitor. Bring them back to our pod, Lisa," said Spencer. "Mommy, come to see the meteorite shower. You can see from the front windows when you look up," said Janie, jumping in between Spencer and Lisa. Spencer got up and headed to the kitchen area of the pod and made some cereal. Sitting at the breakfast bar, he looked out of the pod's windows and up to see the meteorite shower. The hot cosmic rocks bounced off the settlement's biodome structure. Spencer looked back into the bedroom and smiled as Janie bounced up and down, tormenting Lisa. There was a bleeping sound coming from the pod intercom panel. "One unread message," spoke the robotic woman's voice, as a 3D envelope slowly turned around the holographic screen. Spencer waved his hand over the email. It was a message from Launch Control. It read, "Note to Spencer Green. Standheim's instructions. Relay all information regarding the tracking of Mega Cruiser flight coordinates. This morning, a blip was recorded in the Gliese galaxy. Reporting to launch base for details. Message end." Spencer took a deep breath and ran his hand through his hair. This was it. The message he had been waiting for. This meant that Kramer could have possibly made it. The blip was a long-range signal that can only be activated once the main cryopod is exited. Spencer smiled and ran back into the bedroom, opening the wardrobe and throwing on N.P.R.P. standard clothing. Lisa looked up. Janie lay at the side of her, holding her bear, Jake. "Hey, what's the rush, Spencer?" said Lisa in a sarcastic tone. "Yeah, what's the rush, Spencer?" giggled Janie, copying what her mother had just said. "Girls, I ain't got time to explain now, but rest assured, I think it's good news," said Spencer, jumping lightly onto Lisa and Janie and growling like a monster to scare Janie. Janie laughed. Spencer got up once more, fixed his tie, and headed out towards the launch base. Chapter 12. 27 years earlier. First flight of the N.P.R.P. Mega Space Cruiser to Glais 581D. The N.P.R.P. Mega Space Cruiser was the first and last mass intergalactic transportation craft. It was enormous and had took 27 years to build and had a passenger capacity of 10,072 and enough cargo storage for 1,720 EMTs. Since Standheim's amazing breakthrough of how to harness the power of an electrical thunderstorm's lightning bolt, it allowed immense power to be stored, allowing the cruiser and the small EMTs to travel great distances. On arrival to Glais, each EMT would be assigned for chance missions to other planets that were in view inside the Glais galaxy, magnetic alignment permitting. Electromagnetic pathways on which the EMTs could travel were only accessible upon lining up certain stars. Magnetic connection must have to be strong. For a quick journey, a half-powered electrolift would lengthen a journey leaving its occupants inside the EMT, with a journey doubling its expected arrival time, leaving all sorts of technical and human body problems. The craft's main structural construction consisted of titanoid, an alien material that was found in July 1972 from a crash landing from a meteorite that came from Glais. Its properties were scrutinized, enabling scientists to work out its generic structure. This strange material could morph into any shape, in a kind of shape-shifting way. The same applied to the smaller, limited space EMTs, which used less boost power and traveled shorter distances. The craft's appearance resembled the shape of a stingray, from head to tail creating more of a triangular shape with rounded edges. On the underside of each round edge were spheres that collected the power for travel, allowing the cruiser and the small EMTs to travel great distances. On arrival to Glais, each EMT would be assigned for chance missions to other planets that were in view inside the Glais galaxy, magnetic alignment permitting. Electromagnetic pathways on which the EMTs could travel were only accessible upon lining up certain stars. Magnetic connection must have to be strong for a quick journey. A half-powered electrolift would lengthen a journey, leaving its occupants inside the EMT, with a journey doubling its expected arrival time, leaving all sorts of technical and human body problems. To work out its generic structure and positioned atoms, this strange material could morph into any shape, in a kind of shape-shifting way. The same applied to the smaller limited space EMTs, which used less boost power and traveled shorter distances. Each sphere on the underside of the craft were known as positive charging boosters. These boosters connected with the launch pad's 3 negative spheres. Firing between the craft and the launch pad were electrical blue charges, creating a kind of push and pull magnet effect, but on a seriously bigger scale. These were charging points for the craft's amazing electromagnetic travel. The craft was a perfect aerodynamic shape, with an eye-squinting bright silver exterior. Once charged, the craft could travel at a phenomenal speed and unimaginable distances. This first and last MITC, Mass Intergalactic Transportation Craft. Chapter 13. Spencer boarded the shuttle to launch control. He took a seat at the front shuttle capsule, heading towards the settlement center. There were about 15 other travelers on board, N.P.R.P. employees going about their daily business. Spencer pulled down the internet headset from the storage area above him. The headset enabled the user to connect to the N.P.R.P. database. Spencer used his eyes to control the on-screen options. He searched the N.P.R.P. archives for the pod number of Leah Edwards and Maisie Stoner, Jim Stoner's girlfriend and daughter. The computer headset began to spin through a number of pictures rapidly. Within 10 seconds, the search had found a match. Pod 66. This was all Spencer needed to know. Spencer sent an SMS to Lisa back in the pod telling her of the location of Leah and Maisie, and to tell them of the alternate travel plans. Spencer pushed the headset back into the storage above and looked around cautiously. Database searches were illegal if no authorization was but given. Spencer used his knowledge to bypass the legal red tape. The shuttle slowed down silently as it arrived in the center. Spencer stood up and headed for the shuttle door and alighted onto the shuttle's platform. He followed the directions to launch control. He used his swipe card to enter the main control room. Standing at the main control panel, just in front of the EMT's viewing window, stood Sergeant Kevin Jenkins. He was talking to one of the technicians who was in control of EMT coordinates. He watched the launch of an EMT outside through the viewing window as he walked towards Jenkins. "Ah, Spencer, thank you for coming," said Jenkins. "No problem. I only just got the message. Is it true what I read? That there has been a location fix on Kramer's flight?" said Spencer. "About 3 hours ago, this technician here on duty recorded a blip and a faint audio radio communication, the location we got. But the audio was faint and hard to understand. The location we have recorded is coming from Glais. I was hoping, Spencer, could you take a listen to the audio and tell us whether the voice we hear is Kramer's? If so, then we know that he and hopefully the whole crew on board have made it. I was amazed when I heard this news, Spencer. The journey was supposed to take 10 to 15 years. It has been 27, said Jenkins, surprised. I met Kramer once or twice back in my younger days training for N.P.R.P. Hard to believe if he's still alive. He will be over 70 years of age, but with a genetic body age of around 47. Cryosuspension will be proven as a success, said Spencer with excitement. Run the audio playback, said Jenkins to the technician. The technician waved his hand over the computer's instrument panel. A visual display of sound and graphics appeared in hologram. A crackling sound could be heard. The graph spiked as a voice in the distance could be heard. It was very faint. Could you tell who that was, Spencer? Asked Jenkins. I heard one word, Standheim. Use advanced audio enhancement, ordered Spencer to the technician. The technician waved over his hand to the selection Spencer had asked for, and the adjustment was made. This time, a full sentence could be heard. The rest faded out. Spencer and Jenkins looked at each other concerned. They had both recognized the voice. Mayday, Mayday. Repeated message for General Standheim. The craft are stable, and its passengers are safe. We have arrived in the Glais galaxy. Some kind of strange vortex is pulling us toward it. The craft is unresponsive. There is a... Message end. Is that all we got? Said Spencer. The signal completely fades after that. We still have no evidence of life there, said Jenkins. The excitement of the discovery had diminished. Spencer stared out of the viewing window and watched as another EMT launched, carrying more passengers to the moon. And then, their doom. Spencer, when you were with Jim Stoner just before he had his breakdown, resulting in him taking his own life, did he mention anything about the coordinates and alternative travel to Glais? Said Jenkins inquisitively. Spencer knew Jenkins was fishing for information on the advanced EMT that Standheim had told him of. Standheim always confided with Spencer and Jim Stoner. He thought Jenkins' ways of controlling N.P.R.P. were radical and brainless. Standheim and Jenkins were on different wavelengths. The fact that he had mentioned that Stoner had took his own life was conspiracy enough that he knew about the secret launch base and the advanced EMT he and his family were to be taking to Glais. Jenkins called the order to terminate Stoner to stop him causing mass panic in the settlement. Stoner was a good friend of mine, and as far as Stoner taking his own life, I find that hard to believe. All Stoner talked to me about was how much he loved his family. A man who tells you this, in my opinion, would not take his own life, said Spencer defensively. I'm sorry you feel that way, Spencer, but you do know Stoner had a history of mental illness, said Jenkins. Sergeant, we all have mental issues. Stoner would not have taken his own life. I want constant monitoring of Kramer's whereabouts, said Spencer, changing the uncomfortable conversation, which would lead to Jenkins knowing further. Spencer headed for the exit of the control room. If you know anything, Spencer, it is a matter of N.P.R.P. business. Any withheld information will not be tolerated, shouted Jenkins over to Spencer. He turned round to Jenkins. What you seem to be forgetting, Jenkins, is that I am in control of N.P.R.P. business now. Standheim left that position to me, remember? Said Spencer with authority as he left the control room. Jenkins slammed his fist down onto one of the control desks and huffed angrily. Spencer headed back to the shuttle area and boarded, returning back to Lisa and Janie at the pod. He was a little panicky as he settled into a seat. He stared at the variety of hologram screens that covered the inside of the shuttles, each screen displaying adverts. One advert caught his attention. N.P.R.P. life opportunities. The screen showed a beautiful blonde woman with a background of roses and clouds. Each EMT passenger that arrives on the moon is given the option to become what they have always dreamed of. Maybe it was that clone controller job you always wanted, or even an N.P.R.P space technician, right down to the easier side of life, working from home as a mind microchip programmer. The options are limitless here at N.P.R.P Life Opportunities. The woman on the screen, to Spencer's left-hand side, droned on about the false hopes she was selling to all unfortunate N.P.R.P residents. Touched the exit screen on the advert, the picture vanished and Spencer was left with a view out of the window. It was not much to see as the speed of the shuttle blurred the outside vision to just a white streak. Spencer drifted into a thoughtless daydream as the shuttle's announcements told everyone that the next stop was N.P.R.P's pod settlement. Spencer had to make the arrangements tonight. He would gather Leah, Maisie, Lisa, and Janie into Pod 72 and make an early departure. 8:27 a.m. At this time, the eddy current will be up and running, allowing a sufficient amount of electrical magnetic charge to launch Base 227. Spencer got off the shuttle and made his way towards the lift to Floor 1 and back to his family in Pod 72. Arrangements were to be made. About 25 yards behind, Jenkins watched as Spencer entered the lift. He has entered the lift. I want him watched tonight. I need 2 guards on his pod till further notice, said Jenkins into headlink communication device. Jenkins headed back to control launch. Security from across the square followed behind as they boarded the N.P.R.P shuttle towards launch control. Do we have a report on the breach on the outskirts of the settlement? Said Jenkins to one of the security. Earlier on that day, Jenkins had sent out 3 of security personnel on electro bikes. These bikes were perfect for riding over the wastelands. Made from titanoid, the same material as the EMT, their perfect aerodynamic shape let the rider glide along at a comfortable speed. They sped along about a foot from the floor, propelled along by strong magnetic currents. There had been an attempted breach, not serious enough to send out a full-scale breach warning, so Jenkins had security check it out. They are now positioned at the west side of the biosphere, Headlink reports said. There seems to be a large crack on one of the lower panels of the biosphere, and unused humans were spotted. There has been no contact since then, sir, said security. Jenkins stormed off of the shuttle, making headway to launch control. A high-pitched whistling noise emitted from the 3 electro bikes as they traveled at speed side by side the settlement, now in the distance behind. As the 3 heavily armed N.P.R.P security made their way toward the west side of the biodome. Debris from rocks, glass, pieces of metal, and human parts, skulls and bones under the bikes scattered as they cruised along towards their destination. Ahead, 100 meters, it looks like we have a break-in. Unused humans spotted. I see 3 of the subjects. Confirm, said one of the security into his headlink, which connected all 3 security. Copy that, said the other 2. The security brought the bikes to a standstill about 50 meters from the 3 unused humans. They looked to see that they had broken through, and were now standing on the inside of the biodome, staring wildly toward the security. They were grotesque-looking figures. Radiation had fired their brains. A number of chemical gases that remained in the air had melted their facial features. Eyes hung halfway down their faces. Skin looked like a mass of melted wax. There was an animal-sounding shriek as the 3 unused humans ran toward the security. To each side of the security, there were more unused humans that were inside, at least another 20, running freakishly towards them. There was a beam of blasts from the security personnel's neutron lasers. Body parts from the unused humans exploded into the air. Mass carnage ensued. But there was just too many that had broken into the settlement. The security were now overwhelmed by the sheer number. The lasers blasted away, blood spurted into the air, covering everybody. There was a scream from the 3 security as the unused humans viciously devoured their flesh, the rest of them headed toward the settlement. Chapter 14. Evacuation Day. Spencer woke up at 7 a.m. Lisa had spoken with Leah the night before. Her and her daughter Maisie had stayed in the living area of the Pod 72. As requested by Spencer, Lisa had explained the new travel plans. Leah now knew all there was to know about the change of EMT. Spencer opened the vault, taking out the briefcase Standheim had given him, and Lisa's handbag. Lisa got up and woke up Janie, Leah, and Maisie. "We need to be down at the base for 8 a.m. I need to do the final checks, then we launch at 8:27 a.m., said Spencer. He opened the case and took out the neutron laser. "Spencer, why have you taken that out?" said Lisa. "Wow," said Janie, running over to Spencer, admiring the laser. "Just a precaution, Lisa," said Spencer. Spencer walked to the exit of the pod, using his slide card to open it, and looked outside into the corridor. At the end stood 2 N.P.R.P. security, covering the lift area. Spencer quickly ducked back into the pod to avoid being seen by the security. "Shit," said Spencer. "What's wrong?" said Lisa. Maisie and Janie were chasing each other around the sofa, both holding their toy bears. "There's security at the bottom of the hallway. We're going to have to use the stairs," said Spencer. "What about the security sensor on the emergency door? It will alarm the guards," said Lisa. "Don't worry. I'm going to override the system," said Spencer. "Is everybody ready?" said Lisa. They all nodded, then walked towards Spencer near the exit. Spencer took a look out of the pod once more, to the right at the bottom of the hallway. The guards stood with their backs towards him. "Now," said Spencer. They made a quick dash to the left and towards the emergency stairwell. Spencer flicked open the security panel, which allowed access to the door. He fumbled with a few wires, then whoosh, the door to the stairwell opened without the alarm sounding as they made their way down the stairs. At the bottom of the stairs, Spencer was confronted with the same door as the entrance to the emergency stairwell. Once again, Spencer worked his magic and opened the emergency stairwell door to the settlement square. Lisa, Leah, Maisie, and Janie followed behind Spencer as he made his way through the hustle and bustle of N.P.R.P. employees going about their business in the square. It was too late. 2 N.P.R.P. security personnel had spotted them from across the other side of the square. "Sergeant Jenkins, we have a fix on Spencer Green. Unable to pursue on foot. Subject heading towards EMT maintenance launch areas, awaiting instructions," said one of the security personnel into his remotely linked headcom system. "Get me a precise location, damn it," replied Jenkins angrily. "Sir, I would say maintenance tunnel 227. Don't worry, sir. That tunnel is secure and out of service. There are no EMTs in use in that sector. We have deployed a cambot to track their position. They won't get far. The tunnel leads to the wastelands," said security. Cambots were used for out-of-range surveillance. Cambots were camera robots. They were designed for tracking persons silently and at a distance, without the assailant knowing it was there. This flying silver sphere contained 360 degrees crystal clarity audio and video devices that floated around weightlessly. "Quickly, we gotta move," said Spencer to the group with authority. "They're here," said one of the security personnel into his remotely linked headcom system. "Give me a precise location, damn it," replied Jenkins angrily. "Sir, I would say maintenance tunnel 227. Don't worry, sir. That tunnel is secure and out of service. There are no EMTs in use in that sector. We have deployed a cambot to track their position. They won't get far. The tunnel leads to the wastelands," said security. "What the hell is down there?" said Jenkins inquisitively, viewing Spencer and the group running down the tunnel to what seemed to be a dead end. "Nearly there," said Spencer's echoing voice. By this time, armed security were behind them. Spencer turned and could see them in the close distance. "Here we are," said Spencer as he stopped at the end of the tunnel. A giant solid metal door sat in front of them. "Where?" said Lisa nervously. Spencer opened his briefcase and took out a set of numbers on a piece of paper. He threw his neutron laser over his shoulder, dusted a panel next to the door frame to expose a numbered keypad. There was a loud bang as blasts from a security neutron laser hit the door, just missing Lisa. A ricochet cracked off the wall. It happened so fast. "Get down!" shouted Spencer. Lisa, Janie, and Maisie ducked behind an N.P.R.P. tool chest. Leah was not to be seen. There was a flashing array of neutron beams firing back and forth as Spencer fired back. Spencer hit one of the security, leaving a pile of dust in his wake. Spencer took aim as the second of the security personnel came running closer. Behind the security floated the cambot. Spencer blasted the weapon, hitting the cambot. It spun and evaporated. The security threw his hands above his head as Spencer let off a second blast, hitting the N.P.R.P. security clean in the chest, toasting him to dust. There was a coughing from Lisa, Janie, and Maisie as the dust from the shots fired dissipated. "Is everybody okay?" said Spencer with concern. "Mommy!" screamed Maisie, now standing over the ash remains of her mother, Leah. And Janie ran towards Spencer and clung to his legs. Lisa ran over to Maisie and tried to gently move her away from this tragic scene. Spencer punched in the numbers: 5, 2, 15, 19, 72, 11, 3, 93. As Lisa came walking over with Maisie sobbing in her arms, trying to calm her down. There was a large clunk, and a metal scraping sound erupted from the giant door. The door slowly worked its way upward to reveal Launch Base 227. About 100 feet ahead of Spencer stood the EMT Standheim had told him about. They headed through the giant doors towards the EMT. Spencer punched the same numbers into a touchscreen control monitor controlling the EMT. The egg-shaped craft's doors morphed open. T-minus 5 minutes to launch, said a computerized voice from the control monitor. It was now 8:22 a.m. A loud smash was then heard as the meteorite shower penetrated the biosphere's roof in the distance. There was loud screams as the burning meteors crashed through into settlement areas, killing anyone in its path. Security breach, security breach, security breach was heard over a loud tannoy. Spencer now knew there was no turning back. If the biosphere had been breached, it meant only one thing. The wasteland's unused humans were now capable of entering the settlement. "Get inside," shouted Spencer to Lisa, Janie, and Maisie. Jenkins ran down the tunnel towards Spencer. "Stop!" cried Jenkins. He was pointing a neutron laser towards Spencer. "I think I'll be taking that last seat, Spencer," said Jenkins, walking slowly towards him. More meteorites smashed through the biosphere's roof. Spencer punched in the numbers: 5, 2, 15, 19, 72, 11, 3, 93. Jenkins stepped out of the way of a scorching golf ball-sized meteorite as it slammed down at the side of him. More screams could be heard. It was chaos. Spencer pulled up his neutron laser and pointed it in a standoff with Jenkins. "By the time you pull that trigger, there'll be a shot coming right back at you. Now back away, Jenkins," said Spencer, slowly making his way into the EMT. "I said stop!" screamed Jenkins. It was too late. Spencer had sealed the EMT. "No!" shouted Jenkins as he fired a shot from his neutron laser at the EMT. It just ricocheted off into the distance. "Ugh!" screamed Jenkins as he threw his hands above his head. There was another loud smash as a piece of the biosphere roof came smashing down right on top of Jenkins, squashing him like a grape. The settlement's biospheric containment bubble was now becoming completely compromised. Smashing glass, people's screams, and burning debris filled the launch area. Just then, there was a loud buzzing sound as the EMT powered up. T-minus 1 minute to launch. Inside the EMT, Spencer prepared the cryopods for all 4 of them. Spencer pushed the controls to release the cryopods from their storage area. "Are we all ready?" said Spencer. They all nodded a yes. Spencer put a sobbing Maisie into the emergency pod first, followed by Janie. He gave them both a kiss on the forehead. "We are going to have a little sleep, and then we're going to be in a better place, okay?" said Spencer to the girls. "It's going to be fine," said Lisa, assuring the girls, now stroking both the girls' hair. Maisie had now stopped crying. Spencer pushed the controls to seal the children's cryopod, the metallic coffin-like structure sealed tight with a clunk. The girls' faces were seen briefly through a small window on the pod, before instantaneously the inside of the cryopod turned to ice. Lisa lay inside of her cryopod. "I will see you soon, baby," said Spencer. He kissed Lisa and sealed the pod. T-minus 30 seconds to launch. Spencer set the cryo control panel to auto-seal and pushed the auto-E-walls of the biospheric bubble and crash landing in the wastelands. A constant shower of meteorites smashed through the roof, some missing and some hitting persons underneath. N.P.R.P security were in their droves culling as many of the unused humans as they could. The settlement had become fully breached. 0. There was a blinding light as the EMT Spencer and his family occupied lifted and shot toward the sky at an astonishing speed, leaving the remains of the settlement, which had now become part of the wastelands. The Earth and the Moon were now being pulled at an unnatural speed toward the sun and total doom. Inside the EMT that Spencer and family were traveling, red lifeline lights flicked on and off on each of the cryopods, A repetitive beeping sound could be heard from the control panel, indicating their positions on the coordinate map structure. The EMT suddenly burst into light speed, 300,000 magnetism leaving a trail of colors behind it like a spectrum. Evacuation.